We began just building this church, and man, things went well.
It doesn't matter. None of that matters when it comes to being used of God. God can take anyone and use them miraculously in spite of the fact that we are in a broken world. You say, my God, have mercy. That's the kind of perspective of a young little boy who can walk up to a king and say, I ain't scared of him. Why was he not scared of Goliath? It was perspective. While they were saying, Goliath is big, David was saying, who is he to insult the God of Israel?
It was just crazy how God was providing, and people were coming, and we were packing that little building. I mean, at that point, we were putting more people in there than you ought to have in the building. And it was just good things going on. We had a clothing ministry going for the needy in the community. We had a Men at Work ministry, so we're out doing work projects for needy people. I could just keep going about the things that God was doing there. We had community events. We had a Thanksgiving feast where we would feed about 400 to 500 people. God had just caused this thing to explode, and he was doing an amazing thing there in Granbury, Texas. And I wish that I could tell you that the story continued to flourish from there, but unfortunately, while the church was thriving, I was personally dying. Hey. Today's episode is episode 4 in a chain of 6 episodes. And there will be a link in the description that is a playlist for all of these episodes. We'd love for you to take the time to go through them if you so choose. It'll be there for you if you desire it. So we've been going through my journey, Tim Pixler, for this purpose, hoping that it would be there for a help to somebody who may be going through a similar journey, or even for those who are not, just for your understanding, for your education, and maybe you can apply it to areas of your life as well. So here we are. We talked about in episode 1, when I was a kid, being raised as a PK of a Oneness Pentecostal preacher, the impact it had on my life, the positive impact it had on me that I still enjoy to this day, my upbringing in my dad's church, my parents, godly people, amazing people, and taught me so much about walking with the Lord and principles of life. I really, really honor that heritage. Moved on from that into when I went into full-time ministry, and then eventually to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and served at a church there for a decade or a little more. And some of my experiences there where I began to really question, it caused me to have questions that then led to me looking at the doctrinal things again, and then walking through those issues and trying to get an honest understanding, being willing to question. And then we talked about that a lot in episode 3, the fear of questioning, afraid that I was being deceived, and finally embracing that I had to be honest with God and myself, and that in that sincerity, if I asked God for an egg, he would give me an egg and not a scorpion, that he would allow me to find truth. Ended last episode talking about the motivation for why I began to make the journey, and it was not because of wanting the world or living in a different lifestyle away from the standards of the movement I was in, such as no facial hair, no short sleeves, no television video, all those different things that were standards, and you can hear that in previous episodes if you so choose. It wasn't just from walking away from that. It certainly wasn't so I could try to grow a larger congregation. I felt I could grow a large congregation within that movement, so I didn't feel like that was a need to move away from it. But the actual reason is one surprising to people within the movement, and that was I had to be honest and I wanted to follow Jesus. That was the motivation, and I was willing to pay the price. So I had made the decision at this point to be honest with myself and could not unsee what I had seen. And I was willing to pay what I knew would be a hefty, hefty price. It would turn out to be an even bigger price than I imagined. And episode 5, we'll get into more of that. But I knew some of the price I would pay, and I was willing to do it. So having made that decision, the next step became, how do you make this journey? So the way out, if I should ultimately choose to leave, was not immediately clear to me. And I wasn't real sure at that point even that I would leave. Now, this is going back to about 2010, and I didn't actually make a public departure from it until about 2013 to 14. 2014, I think, is when I publicly left. So in this period of time, of 2010 to 2014, I was very much sure that I had seen things differently in the Word of God, but had not yet made a public move and wasn't sure how to do that, when to do that, or much of the time if I was even going to do that. So it was a really, really difficult period there of just trying to make those final decisions. I had quit mentioning things in my preaching that contradicted what I had seen in the Word of God. I only preached subjects that were accepted in Oneness Pentecostalism and were not contradicting revelation that I had personally received. So some people began to notice that. Some even mentioned that he doesn't preach on certain standards or subjects as much as we'd like him to. But it was because of me trying to still be honest. I was still trying to live basically in two worlds in my head. So having seen what I'd seen in the Word of God and yet still loving what I was doing, loving the preaching, loving the friendship, loving the camaraderie, loving my whole world, and just really torn between the two. And really wondered if I might just go ahead and stay with it even though I didn't fully believe it, and then eventually made the decision that integrity was more important than influence. But how you make this journey out. In 2010, we decided to plant a new church in Granbury. Now this would prove ultimately to be my way out, but I wasn't sure of that initially. I had some great support and what I held as good friends who were there for us. And I struggled with remaining because of my appreciation and love for those guys. I did truly love and appreciate them and what they had done for me. I made a grave mistake in thinking we were friends on a deeper level than what we were. It was professional. It was ministerial. It was transactional, is what these relationships were. I really saw them more as personal and intimate, and so I really had a hard time walking away from those. Of course, they would feel like my walking away from them meant that I wasn't the friend that I should have been on that level as well, to be fair. But so this was a struggle. It was a hard time. How do I do this? For the first couple of years, we were establishing this new church, and miraculous provision came in. It's an incredible story. I'd like to share a little bit of it on this episode, but we moved to Granbury, Texas. That's a town about 30 minutes southwest of Fort Worth, and we rented a house there and rented a little building for $500 a month. We rented a little church building, and it was not anywhere close to a church building when we rented it. It was a metal building. It was 40 by 50 was the dimensions on it. It had been a tattoo parlor. It had been a game room. It was just had not had any care or love at all. When I walked in it, it had about 5 different colors on the walls. One wall was covered in mirrors. The drop ceiling was falling in, molded black. It was a disaster. And then it had, I think, 2 wall units in it for air conditioning that didn't work hardly at all. But here I am walking into this, and I had felt the Lord tell me to just start taking steps, because I had been praying, Lord, please direct my steps. And I felt the Lord say to me, I can't direct steps that you won't take. So I thought, okay, well, I'll have to start taking some steps. You can't steer a parked car, right? You need some momentum. So I started asking myself, what can I do right now? Not what will I do when this happens, but what can I do right now? And so I was standing in that building, and we didn't have much money to put in it. I'd spent my money to rent it and pay the deposit, and I'd had some money left over from a severance package from Tulsa when I had left from there. And so I put whatever money I had to just kind of get us launched, but I was pretty much out of funds. And so I was looking around, and I thought, well, it don't take any money to tear out this drop ceiling in here. This has got to go. It's obviously trash. So I went home, got my ladder, came up there, and I just started in there by myself, and I started pulling this stuff out and working. And while I was doing that, I received a call from a man who said that he would like for me to come over to a men's conference they were having. And I began to kind of hedge a little bit, and he picked up on the fact I probably couldn't afford it. So he said, look, if you'll come, I'll pay your way over here, rent you a room. I just want you to come and have some fellowship, be around some guys. I said, well, I could use that. So I did. I went to the meeting. At the meeting, they took up an offering and sent me home with $2,400. And so I went back to my little building with $2,400, and now I had money for paint. I had money to this is just kind of how it started rolling. And then just miracle after miracle would happen through this time. We had, once we got the church kind of rolling and started, we started with my family, which is 5 of us. And then our first Sunday, we had 2 people, a woman and her daughter, that committed to coming to the church. So there were 7 of us to start off. But the church began to grow. I remember one particular miraculous provision was from the saloon owner down the road. I was leaving service on a Sunday morning and felt impressed by the Lord to go to the saloon. I just love to say that because I love the impact that has. But here's what had happened. We'd known there had been an armed robbery at the saloon and had heard someone was killed in the robbery. So we'd been praying for this situation at church, and I just felt like I need to go let them know we're praying for it. So a little unconventional for a pastor in a suit and tie to come walking into the saloon on a Sunday afternoon, but that's what I did. Walked in there and I asked for the lady who was the manager. Turns out she was the niece of the man who had been murdered. And so I told her, look, we've been praying for you, wanted you to know. It really touched her. And she said, thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And then in the following months, she would show up to our church and ask for me just at random times and bring several $100s and just give it to us and say, here, put this towards your church. I remember showing up one time and there was an envelope under a rock by the front door, and pulled it out, and it was from the lady at the saloon. And the very last time I ever saw her, she came up and asked to speak to me, and she said, I just want to thank you for coming and praying for me that day and letting me know that you loved us. She said, I started reading my Bible. I got it out after that and started reading. And she said, I'm going to the cowboy church down the highway. She said, but I gave my life to Christ. And I just want to appreciate you for that. Just amazing how God was working. So great things were going on. Money was coming from other churches in the community, from supporting churches, just crazy. And we had some supporting churches around that were in the Oneness Pentecostal movement that were sending us money to help us. So things were apparently going good, but people within the community of churches, the Oneness Pentecostal churches that we were connected with, began to get a little concerned about whether I would be going the direction that they were in or I'd be going a different direction. And one of them visited a service and saw that I had a lady playing the piano who was wearing a wedding band and had on short sleeves. And so he came to me and he said, we're willing to give a little grace because we know you're young and just starting, and this is a new church. You got to use whoever you can, but we want to know that that's not going to continue. Well, I have been in the place of making up my mind. Was I going to try to stay within the movement I had been, or was I willing to make the step out? And this was the indication to me that now I'm going to have to answer this question, and I will not be dishonest. So I told him, I'm not sure that I'm going the same direction. I've had a lot of questions. I've wondered what I'm going to do, but I'm not sure. I know it upset him. And he said, please, think about this. Don't do this. And he said, take some time. Don't give me an answer right now. He said, take some time. He said, take till the end of the year. And this was about October or so. So he said, take a few months. And he and some other churches together were sending about $1,400 a month to us for support at the time. I knew that if I made the decision not to continue down the road and the path, the direction they were in, that of course we would lose that support. So the end of the year in December, I was praying. I knew what I had to do. I called him back and I said, look, I'm now in a position where I'm having to pastor a church. So I have to teach these subjects to people. I can't just go preach in a visiting church and only preach the things that we both agree on. I'm going to have to teach people the Word of God, and I don't believe everything you guys do. So I can't, in all honesty, teach it. He was very distraught, very upset. Other guys in the same movement called and I appreciated it. They were sincerely trying to keep me from going shipwreck in the way that they saw it, and I appreciated their heart for that. But of course, he said we have to pull the funding. I understand, no problem. As a guy up in Decatur, Texas, starting a church that is walking in the path that you can support, send the money to him. I'm sure they could use it. So I was a little at a loss at this point because I just lost my financial support that I had, the little bit that we did have. And I knew I would lose my speaking connections. And so I didn't really know what to do other than I had started a little lawn business at the time. Thought, well, I'll just try to go out and make money to pay for the church and take care of my family. And then God will just have to provide. That was the last month we received support, was December. In January, I got a call from a guy who had been in the youth ministry in Tulsa years before. And he said to me, he said, I'm not connected to a church right now, and I'm trying to remain faithful with my finances. He said, I've got several months of kind of back tithing I'd like to send somewhere. Would it be okay if I sent it there? And I said, well, sure. You know, if you're not connected with a church, if you have a home church, we'd love for you to support them, but send it on to us. The first month he sent in $1,456. In February, he sent in over $1,500. In March, he sent in over $1,600. So the $1,400 we had lost was replaced plus. In April, a man came by the church, introduced himself. He had heard of the things we were doing in the community, of the clothes closet and the different things we were doing to help community-wide. He said, I love it. I want to support it. I'm going to start sending you some money every month. He began to send. At that moment in April, we got $2,000. And for the duration of that church, he gave that much or more per month. So we never missed a dime of support. Now, it wasn't about the money to me, but it was about God saying, you follow integrity and you follow honesty, and I'll take care of the rest. Sermon, he said that you have three groups of people in your life, that the larger outside group, just kind of the crowd that's around you, he said that they were, so you had confidants, you had comrades, and you had constituents. Okay, so comrades was the largest group of people out around you. And these are the people that are doing the same thing you're doing, and they're with you, connected with you, because they are against what you are against. So we are unified by the fact that we fight the same thing. We both hate that, so this brings us together. Then a smaller circle of people would be your constituents, and these people are into you because they are for what you are for. And so he said, these people are a little closer to you. They're not just against what you're against, but you actually have the same vision and the same mission. You're for the same things. He said, but within that circle, I don't know where that came from, but within that circle is a very small group of people that are confidants. He said you can count on one hand generally the number of actual confidants you have in your life. He said, here's the difference in a confidant. They're not into you because they're against what you're against. They're not into you just because they're for what you're for. They are into you for you. He said, this is the person that would show up and bail you out of jail. I had made the mistake of feeling like my ministry friendships and connections were on that level. And I was soon to realize that there would only be very few who would actually even pick up a phone to text or to call to actually have a personal conversation with me when I left the movement. And that hurt. I really thought more would actually, because if they truly believed I had left and was going to hell, wouldn't I at least deserve a phone call? I understood and tried to reason that out in my head because I knew the fear that exists within the movement of talking to people who leave. The same fear I had of being deceived is that they don't want to talk to someone and then their words would begin to pull them aside. So they'll encourage people to ostracize you and to cut you off because you have now gone into error, and now we cannot even sit down to have a meal with a person like that. So I tried to understand that and yet still deal with the rejection of it, but knowing it was a consequence of the decision I made. So I was bearing the responsibility of it, but it was really hard to walk through some of that trauma. And I began to probably handle it wrong. I worked harder. So the way to ignore the effects of the trauma of the rejection I had actually undergone was to pour myself more into what I was doing. And that I did. I worked ridiculous hours, trying to make this thing happen. And when you first start, building a church with nobody else there, you do everything. In fact, I actually made an organizational flow chart for the church and laid it all out in all the eventual positions and ministries, and wrote my name on every line because I was it pretty much. Me or my wife. It was me or Lisa, and of course our kids were there helping us, but they were young, and so I just worked and worked and worked. Man, I tried to help people. People around me tried to connect to me. There are other pastors in town were very good to me, and they tried to connect to me. They invited me to pastor journey groups and Bible studies. I went to a few, and honestly, I was too hesitant to connect. I was so afraid of out of the frying pan into the fire. So am I going to go from this kind of group that I was a part of just to the same thing somewhere else, where it's still political and you really only matter because of what you contribute to the movement? Now, to clarify, there were a few people from within my former life that remained connected to me and do to this day. And I really, really deeply appreciated that, because I understood I meant more to them than just what I brought to the movement or to the table. But the personal trauma was extremely, extremely hard for me to deal with. And so it began a part of my journey that was not good. And in episode 5, I want to begin to get in and actually talk a little more about that, the effect this can have when you begin to walk away from a fundamental fundamentalism in any type of sense, whether it be the group I came from or others that are similar to it. There's a danger of a pendulum swing, and I was aware of that danger. And still did not completely avoid it. Because here's the problem. When you finally acknowledge that there are things that you were lied to about, you then start saying, well, if you lied to me about this, did you also lie to me about that and that and that? And then you begin to question everything throughout your life that you've ever been taught. There's the danger of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, as the old saying is, in that you start losing your mooring for everything, because it must have all been a lie. It must have all been wrong. And so the questioning that you go through, you should not do alone. And that's exactly what I tried to do. I didn't connect with hardly anybody through that time. I just thought the answer to this is to pretty much forget about everyone else. I didn't want to be a part of the whole conversation of those who had left Oneness Pentecostalism, who were trying to fight it. In fact, I've been out of that for 11 years now. And this is the first time, other than an interview I did with my brother a couple years ago on a podcast he was doing, this is the first time I've ever publicly made any kind of recording or statement having to do with my journey out of there, because it was never my goal to become a part of the group that just started fighting the people we came with. Then we do the same thing we're accusing them of. And I didn't want to do that. I had no desire to have sour grapes, to have a bad attitude and let that begin to taint everything I did. So I thought the thing to do is just get into this work right here and just work myself to death. And that's what I did. And on the personal, private side of things, the pain I was dealing with, I began to unfortunately give in to things that were not pleasing to the Lord and were destroying me on a personal level. And that's what we'll get into next week. Don't do the journey alone. Whatever it takes, man, find some people. If you need someone to reach out to, even feel free to connect with us in some way. I have a lot of people who have connected with me over the years, and I've tried to be a help to help navigate this journey in a way that will be healthy. And I learned some things in the way I did it that I would caution people against. And the number one thing I would caution anyone against is getting shut off and isolated by yourself. And trying to navigate this thing because you no longer trust anyone. You no longer trust that they truly love you and that they have your best interest at heart. So that would be I think what I'd leave you with. And I look forward to getting into the next episode. It's going to be probably personally one of the hardest episodes for me because I'm going to get to share some honest details about a part of my life that was the darkest part of my life. But then, hang around because episode 6 will come and we'll see a little bit of resurrection from the dead. But in the next episode, we're going to talk about some things that died. And I look forward to it, and I hope you will come back and join us. Thank you for joining today, man. God bless y'all.